As we talk about this series, we were talking about transformation and what that looks like. And we started off last week with our series idea. Kind of the theme of what we're talking about is life's journey is not one of destination, but of transformation. We said it's not about where we end up, but it's about who we end up becoming. And we all feel it. We all feel that we're growing, that we're changing, right? And kind of the new year is a great time to talk about this because we feel it more and more at the new year, right? Because people are talking about it, right? People are doing their new diet plans, their new workouts, they're getting their life coaching, they're starting this new thing, this new venture, and they're prepared to do it as they start the new year. And we looked at transformation, and we said that some people look at transformation that it's up and down, it's levels, right? I'm going to level up, I'm going to get better as long as I reach these higher levels, then I've gotten there. And then we said that other people look at it linearly, right? So as long as I'm moving forward, right? As long as I'm moving forward with technology, in education, and all these things, then towards modernity, then I am transforming and becoming what I should be. And we said maybe that those are part of it, but they're not completely it. And we kind of looked at the idea of this spiral and these 4 seasons of life that we tend to go through. And I think if you look at your life from a 30,000-foot view, you see it. And if you look at your life in different seasons, year by year, maybe time by time, you see it as well. We see that there's this call to something new, this discovery of something new, and that's what we're going to talk about today. We said that you move from that into suffering, right? And this devotion that it takes to pour yourself into this new thing. And then the serenity, this delight that comes from this new thing that has happened, and you're starting to understand it, and you're starting to live inside of it, and you're in that good space, and then you turn around and you begin to serve the world around you with it. And so we're looking over the next 4 weeks at this process and what it looks like in our life. And we said when we talk about spiritual forward motion, we're talking about all of life, all of the changes that you're going through, because we believe at the core of that is something spiritual, that something spiritual is going on and it's happening inside of your life, that everything ultimately revolves around that. And so we are going to look at spiritually as well, specifically. So this week, here's what we're talking about. Here's our idea worth discussing. Let's wrap our mind around it, and then we're going to kind of flesh this out a little bit, and then we're going to discuss it together. Our journey of transformation begins by answering the call to something new. Our journey of transformation begins by answering the call to something new, to newness, right? To that thing that we've never seen before, to this new discovery, this new enlightenment, this thing that we've become aware of. And a lot of times, that call to something new, that awareness of something new comes through some very, very tough times, some very, very tough realities, some things that maybe happen to us, right? And it shakes us to our core. This can be a very daunting time. And so as we look at this over the next 4 weeks, I want to look at a guy that we find in the Old Testament of the Bible. And a lot of people, theologians, will say that he's what we call a type of the Christ, right? So he's kind of like, if you look at his life, you can see it fast forwarding. It resembles the life of Jesus. And this guy we're going to look at, his name is Joseph. We can go to the next slide there. We're going to look at the story of Joseph. We're going to break it down week by week, and we're going to look at this process in his life. And one of the things that I love about Joseph, we see that he really embraces this process in his life. We don't see that he resists it. We don't see that he bucks against it. He kind of just goes with it. And that's one of the things we talked about last week is how do we begin to transform as we recognize, we embrace, and we participate in the process that is going on in our life continually. And so we're going to recognize, we're going to look at it in Joseph's life, and we're going to talk about how it relates to our life as well. So the story of Joseph starts off like this. In Genesis 37, we see this guy by the name of Jacob. His name was actually changed by God to Israel. And so we see that because Jacob meant like deceiver, right? That was his old life. And Jacob himself had this story in his life, right, where he had this encounter with God, this spiritual change. It's like, hey, I'm not going to be deceiver anymore. I'm going to be something new. And his name was changed to Israel. You're like, hey, that's a country I recognize. You're right. And this is part of where it started, right? And so his father was Isaac, and Isaac's father was Abraham, who was called out by God. And this was this different kind of relationship to a God than he had ever seen before, right? Because they believed in many different gods where he was from. And he saw this God as different, and the relationship that he had with this God as different. So he passed that on to his son Isaac, who would pass it on to Jacob. And this is not a clean and perfect family because they had this relationship with God. This is a really messed up family. And a lot of crazy things happen, as we're going to learn about today. So then you have Abraham, Isaac is passed on to Jacob, and then Jacob really, because Abraham had one son, Isaac had two sons, and Jacob's going to have like 13 sons, okay? So he's really going to start exploding here, this family nation. And so we find that we're going to look at the story of Jacob, and it starts with his son Joseph. His son Joseph came to him as his 12th son. He came to him at a late age in his life. And so his father, the Bible tells us, kind of dotes on him a little more. He loves him a little more than his other brothers because he was his son from his older age. And we see that he loved him so much, he doted on him so much that Joseph actually ended up getting a gift from his father that kind of like made his other brothers really hate him. And he got that Technicolor coat of many colors. Like if you've ever seen the play, right? He got this really fancy coat that showed that, hey, not only do we kind of know in our heads that that's our dad's favorite, but now he's going to prove it because he's going to put on a coat that shows everybody on the outside, I'm my dad's favorite, right? Like every one of you has kids in here, you have a favorite. They just don't know which one it is, right? But this family knew, and it says they hated him. They couldn't even speak a kind word to Joseph. They couldn't say anything nice about him. And then Joseph has a dream. And in this dream, it's they're out tying wheat and bundles of wheat, he and his brothers, and his bundle stands up straight, and all their bundles bow down to his bundle. And Joseph goes and tells his brothers, dude, they already hate you, right? And he goes, and he's like, hey guys, dude, I had this cool dream where like my bundle like stood up and like your wheat bundles all bowed down. They're like, what? You think you're going to reign over us? You think you're going to be our boss? And they hated him even more. Some real family strife here. And then you would think because of like that hate, like he had to feel it, right? But he just couldn't help himself. He has another dream. This another vision of what life could be and what God was calling him to. And he goes out and he tells his family, hey, listen, like there was the sun and the moon and then 11 stars. So like my mom, my dad, 11 stars, and they all bowed down to me. And they worshiped me. And even his dad's like, dude, I love you, but what are you doing, man? Like, are you serious? Do you think you're going to reign over us, that you're going to be our ruler somehow? You're the youngest in this family, and while I love you deeply, do you think that that's how it's going to end up? Because that's not the way things went in that culture. That's not how things operated. He was the youngest. He wasn't going to reign over anybody. He wasn't going to be anyone's boss or ruler. But we see that he has these dreams, and they begin to change everything. And it's our first thing I want to talk about. When we talk about answering the call to newness, is once you've tasted, you cannot untaste. Once you've seen, you cannot unsee. I had a very wise man tell me this as I sat down to tea with him. And I'm just telling him my story of transformation and where God has brought me and from where I was from. And he said, yeah, once you taste, you can't untaste. And once you've seen, you cannot unsee. Once God has shown you something, once he's done something in your heart, you can't get away from it. It's always going to be there. And I think that's kind of where it starts with Joseph, right? This dream is in his heart. It's in his mind. It's there. Hey, this is something, this is a bigger, a broader life, a thing that's different than what I'm used to. And he couldn't get away from telling everybody about it. We're going to talk about that in a second. But maybe there's something in your heart right now that you know, I can't untaste, I can't unsee. God must be doing something. This is supernatural. This I cannot explain it. I don't know what's going on. It's inside of me deeply. And something's going on that matters. And I've got to figure it out. I've got to discover what is going on and what God is calling me to. Let's continue. In the story of Joseph, go to the next slide. In the story of Joseph, it continues. Like his brothers hate him. His dad loves him. But even his dad's like, dude, okay, your dreams are a little crazy. So one day the brothers are in like this other town and they're tending sheep. Okay, these guys were mostly shepherds, right? It's a very agricultural community and time, so they were mostly shepherds, and so they were with the flocks kind of in some other towns. And the dad said, hey, listen, your brothers kind of like, they get in trouble. And we find out that was one of the reasons why they hated Joseph, because he was always reporting back to his dad what kind of trouble they were in. So they were in this other town, and his dad says to Joseph, I want you to go find them, and I want you to come back to me and tell me what's going on, like how they're doing, are they getting into trouble? And so Joseph, he says these things, I think it's very interesting. He says, yes, I'm ready to go. And then his father says, okay, go and report back. Go and report back. And so he does that. He leaves the comfort of his home and he goes out to a strange place, and the intention was to come back. I think it's interesting. He would leave to report back, but he would actually never, ever, ever come back to the place of his home. They eventually, after he was dead, many, many years later, dug up his bones and brought him back to this place. But Joseph would never come back, which leads us to this next idea. It's answering the call to newness. Transformation is only possible when we're willing to leave the village. Now, the village is that place of comfort, familiarity. It's our tribe. It's our family. It's what we know. It's our security. But you cannot change if you stay in one place. Now, again, this can be geographically, like literally. Like I've moved several times in my life, and all those times were times of transformation. But it can also just be, it can be spiritually. It can be the safety and security of that job that you're in. God saying, hey, I want you to leave, and I have a bigger, a brighter purpose for you. And it's scary, and it's terrifying. But God's calling you out to it. Life is pulling you away to something new. And transformation is only possible when we're willing to leave the village. I did a blog post when we first decided we're gonna come down and we're gonna start a church in downtown. And I wrote about my fear in learning in Las Vegas, right? As I sat in a hotel downtown and looked out over downtown and thought to myself, over my years in church world, in church ministry, I had developed these tools. I went out and got these tools. I had sharpened these tools. I had made these tools work. I understood how these tools built what I was building where I was. And then all of a sudden, God's like, all right, now you're done. You're going to go do this new thing. And here's what I realized. I don't have tools for what God's calling me to do. I don't know. I don't know how. Martha lovingly went, then are you sure we should go? I said, yeah. Because God's doing something in our life, and transformation is only possible when we're willing to leave the village. Some of you are stuck in a village, you're stuck in a tribe, you're stuck in a comfort zone that God is calling you out of. And maybe even for some of you, God is forcing you out of it. And change is happening. We want to embrace it. We want to participate in this transformation that's going on. We want to discover the call to the new thing that God is doing in our life. Let's continue the story of Joseph. So he gets there. He's on his way to his brothers. He stops. He asks some guys. They're like, yeah, they're over there. We know who he's talking about. So Joseph goes over that way. And as they see him coming, they recognize him, probably because he had a big bright coat on, right? And they recognize him. And again, you think you got family troubles. They plotted to kill him. And the rational, older brother, the oldest brother, says, okay, let's not kill him. Then we'll have blood on our hands. Let's just throw him in a pit, right? And then he'll die of starvation and thirst. And the blood won't be on our hands. He died. And yeah, we were the ones who threw him in the pit, but somehow, logically, that shifted guilt and blame away. It was very interesting. But actually, this oldest brother, it says, he was planning on coming back to get him. Okay, he wasn't going to let him do this. He knew it would destroy the father. And so they throw him in a pit. And that brother, he leaves, he's going and doing business, and the other brothers are sitting around, they're like, you know what? Actually, I think we have a better idea. We can throw him in the pit and just leave, but we don't gain anything from that. Let's profit off of this, and let's sell this, our brother, our youngest brother, let's sell him into slavery. Right? There's some traders coming by. And these traders were actually from this other family line that was also attached to Abraham, but was this illegitimate family line. These are actually people that they would have been held very much animosity towards. And we're going to sell him to them. Right? They're gonna hate him. They're gonna who knows what they're gonna do with him? But it's off of our hands, and we actually profit. We make money, and they sell him. And we're gonna talk about what happens when they sell him. We're gonna talk about what happens when that kind of thing happens. But the idea that he was thrown in a pit and that he was moved on to this new thing. Right? He would never go back to the village. Leads us to this last thought. That sometimes we find the thing by moving on to the next thing. Sometimes we find the thing by moving on to the next thing. Again, we can resist the process that's going on in our life, or we can recognize it, embrace it, and participate in it. And when that new thing is in our heart, and again, spiritually, some of you, this may be brand new to you when it comes to faith. For some of you, like faith and God, that may be a part of your past, and you're coming back around to it, and it seems new. And Downtown Faith is there's this whole exploration of this very new way of living out your faith. When this call to something new, you need to discover what God is doing with it, because you can never get to the thing until you move on to the next thing. Again, it's over and it's over and it's over again. And I don't think we're ever done in life if we embrace this process and we participate in it. We're never done growing and transforming and becoming more like Jesus, becoming more like God, growing in relationship to people, loving people better. That's what this process is all about, as we're going to find in the life of Joseph. And I think the author, Alexander Shaya, in his book Heart and Mind, he talks about this fourfold process as it relates to the Gospels and what the people who were reading the Gospels at the time they were reading it were going through. This is what he says about it. He says, what we have thought to be our normal world has crumbled. You ever been there? Turned completely upside down and become chaos. Some of you are in that right now. Still, we have somehow heard our invitation to a new life, mustered our courage, and despite our trepidation, moved ahead. If I had one word, one thought as we go into this new year for our people and for our church and for our leaders, I shared this with them, it's this word, it's just forward, right? We're going to move forward. We're keeping going. We're moving forward. Gaining and sustaining spiritual forward motion. For some of you, you're in this discovery phase, this calling to something new, and it is turning your world upside down. My encouragement today is to have the courage to move forward, the courage to keep going so that you will continue to transform. A couple thoughts on it as we think of this calling and this discovery of something new. We're going to have these for every phase. These are just kind of practical things that I want to help you with. The question to answer as you go through this phase, as we're in this discovery phase, as this call to something new, is simply this: how do we face change? How do I face change? How do we face change as a faith community? That's one of the things is it's happening to you. We talked about this last week. It's personal, but it's really private. Like it's happening to you and through you and in you, but there's people around you that are experiencing it all the time. And the question is, how do we face change? How do we do this together as we transform? The danger in staying. The danger in saying, I'm not going to leave the village. I'm going to stay in this phase. I don't want to grow anymore. I don't want to go through it. I don't want to answer the call to something new. The danger in saying no is immaturity and ignorance. If you don't grow up, it's like, imagine if you just said, you know what, puberty was hard. If I could go back, I would just say, no, I'm not going to do it. Right? We don't really get that opportunity. But imagine, what would you be, right? You'd be 40 years old, looking like a 10-year-old. Right? It would be weird. It's not how we do it. You would be immature. And also ignorance. And I don't mean stupidity or dumb or unintelligent. I mean, it's the idea of you're ignoring what's going on in life. You're ignoring the transformation. There's things out there that God wants to show you in your life that He wants to do in and through you that you'll be completely ignorant of. The spiritual disciplines, silence and study. Remember we talked about Joseph? He came and he shared his dreams and no one understood it? They didn't get it, right? I've learned that when you are facing significant change and that things are going on inside of you and you're not really sure about them and you're asking questions and you're trying to discover what's going on, sometimes saying less is more. Because people aren't going to understand. Because they've not tasted, they've not seen. It's you. Now, there is a time where you want to shout it from the mountaintops. There are people that you do want to talk to. But I think one of the great disciplines of really transforming and starting that transformation is not saying everything to everybody. It's a discipline of silence. I learned that the hard way. Because not everybody's going to get it. And study, right? Study. Learning about what that new thing is. Immersing yourself. Discovering all you can about the new thing that God's calling you to. I want to tell you this, spiritually, if God is calling you to something, study. Study. Someone in our church that I believe is in this phase, is going through this spiritually, and I said, okay, if I got you a book, would you read it? Yes. Okay, I'm going to get you a book, right? We're gonna learn coming up here in a few months. We're going to have one of our groups where we're going to learn how to study the Bible and how to understand it and apply it to our life. And I think that's going to be so important for those of us in this phase. Silence and study. Learning as much as you can. And then our core value here, we say courageous commitment, right? Commit courageously. Jump in. Just have the courage to move forward, because that's what it's going to take to go in to this next phase. And we talk about all the time, we're going to follow Jesus into new life. What we do here is we follow Jesus, and we want to help other people do the same. And Jesus also went through this. Look at what his disciple John, who wrote one of the Gospels, as he was describing Jesus, Jesus came into the world he created. But the world didn't recognize him. So, right, he came into the world. He left the comfort. He left what many would call heaven. He left presence with the dynamic communal energy, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. He left that. He put on an earth suit. He came into the world he created, and that world didn't recognize him, like in Joseph, right? Like they just cast him out. He came to his own people, and even they rejected him. Even they rejected him. Why? Why did this have to happen to Jesus? Because he was a part of something that was new. He was going to introduce something that was brand new to these people. And these people couldn't handle it. They didn't want newness. They didn't believe him. And they rejected him. So when you go through this and you look at that, and people in your life, as you begin to tell them, as you begin to move in a direction, as your world turns upside down, people will reject you. Yay! Change. The key is to keep moving forward. To keep pushing. To have the courage to go into that next thing and view it as God is doing something in my life. Why? Because our journey of transformation begins by answering the call to something new.